We're here in Armagh Heights with Finola McCarthy and Kathleen Chuckrow is here, whether we'll get a few comments from Kathleen or not about Cronin. And of course there's Edso, Crowley and myself, John O'Connor, and the date is the 15th of the 2nd. And we're here to interview Finola on her memories from the past, her memories of her grandmother and some of her uncles who fought in the First World War, about Hugh Duffy and his career, and her father who was in the bank, and we possibly go on to the newspapers and Carnegie and maybe lots more. So Finola, maybe we'll start with, as I said, the war. You had three of your...
Three uncles, Hugh, Mick and Paddy. Uncle Mick went into Tralee, he was underage and he signed up. And my grandfather heard it, and himself and George K. Evans, that would be Dr. Billy's grandfather, they got onto the train and went into Tralee and tried to buy him out of it. And they couldn't because he had signed up even though he was underage. And he went foreign. He was great for writing home, very descriptive letters, and they used to all look forward to the letters. Then Hugh joined and he went from Trinity. He was teaching guys. And then Uncle Paddy, he was Lady Gordon liked him, and she got him a job in the London Library, and that he'd work in the London Library for 3 years and that he'd get a degree. But anyway, he went over to the London Library and he was conscripted.
Right.
The three of them. But in one of the letters that Mick wrote home anyway, he was in some place in France and he saw Paddy walking down the street with a bayonet over his shoulder. He was only 19 years of age. My grandmother was in an awful state. I grew up listening to that. And when the Europe came in, I never voted to go into Europe because I always felt that there'll be a European war or Europe, and that my lads were small at the time. I said they'd be conscripted, and that was one of the reasons why I would never listen to it. Yeah, 3 of them came back.
That's amazing. And there was a good few from around here, Finola joined up that time. But,
oh, they were, yeah. Do you ever remember Johnny Griffin down in the square?
Barely.
And I never knew, I always thought he was a bit odd, but sure, it is shell shock he was. You know, but we didn't know it.
But a lot, when they came back, very few ever spoke much about it.
Oh no. Lucy now, Paddy's daughter, said that he never wanted to talk about it. The only thing he did say was that in the trenches, to hear the horses riding over the trenches, that it was terrifying. But Uncle Mick anyway, he was a different, you'd have a bit of fun with him. You know, that he would tell you, or he'd make up stories. Which or whether I don't know, but we used to enjoy listening to him, you know.
And then they all settled back to normal life when they came back from the war.
Mick was in Customs and Excise. I think he got a job back. And Hugh was teaching, and then he went up to the depot. He was teaching the guards.
Yeah.
And he stayed there. And Paddy then, he went into...
Just so that people know that was Hugh Duffy then.
Yeah. Hugh Duffy, these are all the Duffy boys.
Yeah.
He was one of the first men in the New Ireland, in the police forces.
Well, he was, yeah. Paddy then, he came back, and I think was he in insurance and in Tralee, and the Bank of Ireland headhunted him then, and he ended up as manager of the income tax department of Bank of Ireland in Dublin. They were the 3 uncles that came back from the war. They were so lucky. I suppose it had an awful effect on them. That Lucy said, that's Paddy's daughter, said, That is the only thing he ever really said about it. To hear the horses jumping over. I don't think they were Connemara ponies though.
And what about Hugh then went on to...
He stayed on in the guards. Himself and Jack O'Dwyer went up as teachers to the depot, and Hugh stayed there. He ended up as chief superintendent. As far as I know, he was very interested in the Garda band, and I know when he died they played at his funeral, but he had to retire 3 years before time because he wasn't in the run with Devscroat.
He was in for to become the head of the...
Oh, he was in to be a commissioner. They got someone out of the civil service who came in as commissioner, and I often heard Uncle Hugh say it made his work twice as hard because your man hadn't a clue about the guards.
So he was in the first police force which said that the Free State had when they came into being, you know.
Yeah, but his father used to be an RIC man long ago, and he ended up was his sergeant in Glenbeigh.
And there must have been a big family living there, so...
15.
And where did your own father come in the family there?
My father.
Yeah.
My father, he was third in the family. They were butchers down in Skibbereen.
Oh,
And I had an Uncle Charlie.
Sorry, where did your own mother come in the family?
Oh, my father.
Test. She's not too long there.
She was the 6th youngest.
Out of 50 years.
Yeah. Patsy and Joe were the only 2 born in Killorglin. And there were about 6 of them born in Glenbeigh, and more of them born in Portmagee. But my grandmother wanted to educate. Education was the name of the game. Because I heard when the Carnegie, my mother was attending the Carnegie and Kitty, and during the War of Independence, the Carnegie closed down and they went into Loretta in Killarney in a pony and trap. But Kitty then, she got a scholarship to Carrickmacross, the Louis, and another scholarship out to the Sorbonne University. Nellie then, she was teaching French in Hull. She was the chief French teacher in whatever school she was in Hull. But Agnes had a degree, Kitty, but then when they got married, they had to give it up. Do you know the ban on married women? Mm.
And Patsy in, of course, started.
Yeah. And my mother wanted to go off and train to be a nurse, because she was quite brilliant too, but she was too useful at home. And I often felt that she wasn't happy about it. Well, when my father died, well, if she had a degree, she could go teaching, she could do lots of things.
Yeah.
Then inside the country, you know.
You were saying then earlier on that you remember coming to Killorglin from Wexford, was it?
Yeah, we were living in Wexford.
Where did your mother meet your father, didn't he?
In Killorglin. Wasn't he in the bank here in Killorglin?
Oh, he came to Killorglin.
Yeah.
Right.
He was the bank provincial.
Provincial,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And he was, what was his name?
Florence McCarthy
Yeah.
From
Skibbereen. And someday I was back in Kevin Foley's. Going back years ago, I brought the water safety here to Killorglin, swimming up in the bank. I was instrumental in getting that course coming to Killorglin. And I used to always say all the youngsters who could swim, or who were in the water, but had no respect for the water. But anyway, the course came. And one day I was back in Kevin Foley's, and Kevin said, God, he said, your dad taught us all young lads to swim up in this small river. He was able to swim when he came here, and he taught us to swim.
Oh, yeah.
I thought the coincidence was him teaching and me, you know, which I
Starting the
never
course.
even knew about
Yes.
then, yeah.
Did he die young, reasonably young? Did
My
your
father was 42 when he died.
He died young.
He died in 1947, the year of the snow.
What did he pass away from?
I'd say he had pneumonia, But you had no antibiotics at that stage. I don't think you had anyway. That he died in Wexford, and he was buried in Skibbereen. And sure, John and myself had a great time in the cars. The cars had all to be chained to travel in the snow. So that was wonderful for two youngsters.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know the difference at that stage.
What age were you at that?
7.
First you were young.
Yeah.
And how there was how many of you?
Just the two of us, John and myself, yeah.
And did he travel widely in the bank before he eventually settled in Killorglin?
He joined in Newcastle West, and I don't know, he was sent to Killorglin, and he was here for a few years. But once he was going marrying my mother, a Killorglin person, at that stage he had to be transferred. And he was transferred to Clonmel, and that's where they were living when they were married first.
And that's where you were born?
We were born in Clonmel, yeah. So Tommy Houlihan, you shout for Tipperary because I was born there.
Oh God, yeah. He used to enjoy coming into the shop. Oh God. But come on, we'd say fair enough to back to Killorglin. And was there no mother who started up the business?
No, the business was there. My grandmother had started the business, and it was left to Auntie Jo, but she got married and she had the house up for sale, and my mother bought it and set up the business, you know, went back into the business then. I closed it.
But that was a long time.
But there was a few generations.
There were a few generations reared, yeah.
What was the big changes like in the paper from the time you started till?
The price. I used to keep the price of the papers, you know, when they'd go up, just for you'd have bills to make out. And it is amazing, the Independent went up from 2 pence up to 5 pence, you know, and all along I could go back on the book and see the prices. To me it was interesting. They all went by the board then. But,
was there a local paper at the time?
There were a couple of Kerry papers.
Were there?
You the Kerry Champion, you the Kerry Man, and you had another Kerry paper, which I don't know what the name of it was. Because I know at one stage when Uncle Hugh retired from the police, you know, guards, he was very interested in the Kerry football. And he was writing, even before that, he was writing for a paper under a pen name. But he was going to do a lot, you know. That was going to be one of his interests. I'd say all his stuff was burnt and, you know. But there was a photograph of him taking a salute from Stalin out in Rome when the guards first went out. He led the guards. And I know John said that in some station he was, that photograph was there and he could see Uncle Hugh. We had it in the house, but somebody took it.
It's a pity.
Yeah.
But, and
I'd say it was one of his own that took it, you know, maybe Hugh Duffy himself, young, the Jesuit.
Well, come here, what's the difference from India out the Jesuits? Was there one of the Jesuits as well?
The next generation. Uncle Hugh's son, Hugh, became a Jesuit.
Oh Christ, this was indeed very famous.
As Father Quinlan always said, nobody knows the depth of the Jesuit's mind or the friar's pocket. Oh God, he was wonderful though. You know, he'd come out with fierce sayings. And that was when, and I had a cousin, Kitty's son then, Tom O'Connell, he became a Capuchin friar. And he's dead. But for his 40th anniversary, he was getting a lot of presents and he was putting them in. And I said, God knows, I said, Father Quinlan was right. Nobody knows the depths of the Jesuit's mind or the friars. He enjoyed it.
Yeah. But tell us about Father Quinlan, he was a character or a hero.
Oh, he was. He'd love to come in and he'd love to get two people fighting. He'd say something and he'd stand back then and the smirk on his face, smiling, when the two would be arguing. That's all he wanted.
Devilment, I suppose.
I'd say he was a Killarney man. And then Diarmuid O'Donoghue, they used to meet in the shop. Oh God. And one would have one story better than the next. And Father Quinlan was this big farmer. He used to make the farmers, workmen used to have to eat off the one plate. And Diarmuid said, I have a better one, he says. The farmers made two men eat out of the one egg. Well, I couldn't see them getting much egg out of it. But you couldn't stay in the shop if you didn't have the fun.
But like it was a famous shop. Duffy's shop was a famous shop.
And we had the Stevens's ink sign outside thermometer. And all the people in the winter would come up to see it. Eric Champ's father now, he made it his daily morning ritual. He used to go back after the dogs, he used to have the dogs, and he'd read it. But some Friday night somebody put a nail file in the back and broke the gadget. I have the sign, Stevens's ink sign, that
The thermometer was
I brought that
And
up.
the
I was going to hang
barometer.
it out in the garden someplace. It's still standing in the shed.
Like run up through the school years in Finola, you went to school in Killorglin, right? Wasn't it?
I went to school in Killorglin, the national school in Killorglin.
Who was teaching that? You that
Mrs. Kelly, Mrs. Tobin, Teresa Darty, and I was never in Mrs. Ford. I wasn't in her class at all. But then Miss McCullum took over for Miss O'Doherty.
And you got thick, I suppose, as well.
Sure I did. When you
you
get
get
that, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
She thought that I should be like the Duffy girls, wonderful.
Yeah.
I wasn't. And I'd often say when I'd be hearing, so God, if I was only as good at the lessons, I'd be all right.
I know, did you go away to school in the second
No, I
grade?
went to the Carnegie I was 2 years in the Carnegie, and I wasn't doing any work.
I was an Auntie Patsy teacher there.
Yeah, and then a friend of Auntie Nellie's, a Kathleen Rowan, she was a Loretta, and she advised my mother to send me away, to send me into Dublin, not to Killarney, because I had too many that I knew in Killarney.
You wasn't wild at all at the time.
And you were balked again.
Oh God, I was. I sure the day my mother was being buried down at Skibbereen, the grave digger was there. Father Spring was standing beside me. Oh, he said, Mrs., you were very wild when you were young. Mrs. Berry, oh, she used to have an awful time with you. You were so wild. And I used to turn to Father Spring. I said, Father, would you ever think I was wild? Sure I was. I enjoyed it, but I mean, I had a freedom down there that I wouldn't have, you know.
And you headed for Dublin then.
Yeah, I was there 4 years, and then I went to Bruce Street for a year.
You were 4 years where first?
In a Loretta, Stephen's Green.
Yeah.
And then I went into Bruce Street. I only did a year there because I got laid up. And I came home then, and that is my history.
You went into business in fair play.
I loved it. I loved, you know.
What was it like? Were you allowed out in Dublin then?
No.
You were staying Stephen's Green and...
Oh, we used to go for a walk in a crocodile down Leeson Lane, the hockey pitch. We'd go there, and sure we'd be looking around, we'd be meeting people, and we'd be straggling until we'd come near the school, and then we'd be perfect.
I know brother John, wasn't he a great sportsman here
He was.
in the 50s?
Yeah, he was in the hurling team, and they used to have great fun.
I've heard James Coffey talk about.
Yeah, James used to get tickets for John for the All Ireland and different matches in years afterwards. Smithy then, do you know Patrick Sullivan?
Oh, across the
Yeah,
bridge,
he was another one. And you had Patrick Foley, Patrick Jastix. Yeah. And Mariskiri. And then you had about 3 brothers from Milltown. When they were here, they used to play with the team.
All the Christian brothers.
Yeah, they were presentation brothers, weren't they?
That's
And
good.
Kevin Cremin and Jim Tobin, was it? They were organising the team at the time. I knew Martin Cleary, if you ever knew Martin Cleary, he was in agriculture. He ended up in Killarney.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you stayed played in
back in the track.
the same.
But I was asking somebody lately, I said, do you know how that place got the track? Never knew it.
I
John
thought you
John
would.
A has a greyhound track, and Brendan Riley used to work there, used he?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
There's
Do you
some-
remember that?
I can, I remember it.
Yeah.
There's some good stories
There was a
attached
lot.
to the greyhounds too.
Indeed, there was.
Did you get those?
We got a few, but we didn't get
Yeah.
the stories of
We were told more about the coursing
the course. Like,
below by
Henry.
we're supposed to get
That's
The
the
stories
whitewashed
about-
version.
sorry.
That's the whitewashed version.
Yeah.
There were some great strokes pulled on that track, you know, for dogs.
behind here.
Yes,
How was that? Have you any of them?
I didn't take in enough of them, even though we were, I believe someone belonging to me was involved in them. You're painting the dog like.
Oh, but that's it. It was
Well,
not.
you'd have a slow dog and a fast dog, and they'd be switching them.
Yes.
There was a lot of things done, I suppose, that time.
Oh, it was noted for it. It was noted for it.
But which side of the track was it behind, or how did it start at all? And the greyhounds behind it. Was it?
It was John A. Foley. It was his brainchild, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
And there was a building, can you remember the building? There was a building back
There was a
there.
little house there that...
I know, next to, as you go in on the right hand side.
Just right there.
But that was never covered. That was demolished when I went back there.
Oh, no, I remember.
There was one there on this track that where they used to send the hair
The
running
hair was
around.
running
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
yeah.
And you still go around the whole track.
Oh, yeah.
Used to.
Yeah,
Where the football field is now.
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that.
And then the GA bought it off of John A. and they levelled it. That's how they got that place.
And that's
Eddie
why
Foley, Kevin Foley's father was the main man.
Was he?
Oh.
Yeah.
I remember going back there from school and we picking stones for Liam Foley. And we were promised to film and everything, but we never got
You
to
never
film.
got it.
We said in Killorglin that time, didn't Finola, in the paper shop. It must have been a great old town to films every second night. And
You had is it four films a week? And the night of the dances. St. Stephen's night, Patrick's night, 4 and 4 in the year. God, we used to love watching the couples that they would walk at the other side of the street any other time of the year. But they'd be holding hands going up the town those nights.
that was after the CY started up.
Oh, no, before the CY.
Before the
Yeah.
CY.
Yeah. Because Duffy used to get a lot of the good bands.
Oh,
Yeah.
He had a number of horns, of course, you were saying he could do a block booking
he was a mighty man like that.
Yes, yes, he was a man before his time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cinemas and the matinees.
You still go to the cinema.
Oh, yeah. God, I remember being at the matinee one day. And Maurice Prindiville was in front of me. Do you know Maurice?
Yeah.
And Lal and Hardy were on, and he were bouncing up and down, banging his phone. And the next film came on, and I did that. What you do to me? He never felt it when Lal and Hardy was
He
there.
was so engrossed.
Oh yeah, and it was devilment on my part, you know. It was a Saturday or Sunday. The matinee was
Sunday.
yeah.
What was it costing that time?
4p, was it? Something all like that. I know there was a 4p, or was it a shilling, or it wasn't a shilling, because where
Not
would
at
we
all.
have
Shilling was a big amount of
That
money.
was
That
big
was
money.
20.
where would we have
Yeah.
a shilling, yeah. But I wasn't gone on films at all. Used to be afraid. But I always remember there was a musical in, and Auntie May Prindiville brought her husband, Dr. Joe, in. Well, they said, what a film she brought out. It was anything but suitable. But she enjoyed it, you know.
Crowds of people just to go to the film.
Oh,
at the
yeah.
time, right?
Yeah. But
And
then
what-
the television came in, didn't it?
And she was-
It ruined it. I heard Eamon saying, oh, it's an awful pity that the cinema is closed. Of course, I always go to Killarney to the films, whoever was So, I mean, there's no way he could keep it open.
No. They had the biggest screen in Munster at the time, below the other place, hadn't they?
I'd say so.
Yeah, I think someone told me that.
But then when he opened the new dance hall, he had a dance in the cinema the first couple of nights. You'd go up that way and you're going up a hill because the floor was so, yeah. And then you'd fly down the other side. But should made for all the fun. And then there were good old fancy dresses then too for youngsters.
But your mother was a great card player, wasn't you?
She was, yeah.
You still play the cards yourself?
I tried to. We were playing for her cup last night and she'd have been 111 yesterday had she lived. But she gave a cup to the Killorglin Bridge Club and they were playing for it last night.
Is that the way?
I wonder.
We don't know yet. It could be anyone's game because the cards were so queerless, you know. It wasn't, they weren't easy hands to play.
Where else is there competitions in her memory?
Where
were they?
They were in Fossa, she had the cup there, but Fossa Bridge Club broke down, but they have no cup or anything there now.
Yes.
And for her 90th birthday, she was president of the bridge, how would you call it?
Association?
Not the association, the Congress for a long, long time. And for her 90th birthday, they gave her a party. So a very nice silver thing was presented. But that's gone to an individual now, you know. The club have no cups or anything in there. But that's gone in, yeah. But I mean, it was a pity because it wasn't a cup. I kind of took it out of the design of the Pinto thing, big round this thing. You know, it was lovely. And you had the 4 aces in the centre. And it was Finton Foley that made it, yeah.
She's mentioning the Pinto and therefore you put in ferocious work all down the years looking after all the bookings and that.
21 years.
21 years.
21 years, and then Matty was sick, he was very sick. And in October, I said, now is the time to give it up. He loved it. As the bookings were coming in at first, they'd all go into a box, and then we'd separate them into the nights. And then when he'd be going up, we'd separate one ticket to, you know, make it easier for... But we did work hard at it.
It was like a social service they were providing with all that.
It was.
So it could be a meeting place and everything, wasn't it?
This man anyway, he used to ring up. I'm coming again Friday night. Will you have the same seat as you had last year for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got it, of course?
Oh yeah, we knew that he'd be coming.
Yeah.
He wanted. Yeah.
Where was he from, Killer?
He'd been an uncle of Pat Lynch's. Where does he come from?
Oh, Arthur. Oh,
Yeah, that way, yeah.
Miley, oh, that way.
That way, yeah. Oh, he said the same seat. He's the Uncle Joe, I think. And the same, no, he said that I go to the same seat. And then another man from Inchway. Oh, it is grand, but it's over too late. You can't even get a pint.
But he'd still go to it?
Oh, yeah.
You'd have to find the back way into Grady.
Are you in it now, Edso?
No, I've been in it for 20 years.
The right man?
Garrodi.
Patsy
Cronin.
Patsy Garrodi.
That's
Outstanding artist.
So Patsy was very funny at times.
Har det varit något Kathleen där och de förstår det var provad där. De brought up.
What struck me was the poverty, you know. Whilst they weren't exactly hungry, they were never hungry because they have 2 things going for them, fish and potatoes. It's a good potato, and no matter what kind of a back garden or the side of a ditch or somewhere, you would grow potatoes.
They used to use the seaweed for the manure,
Oh
was it?
yeah, well, up to lately they're doing that.
Yeah.
You know, and they even got as far as where they were chopping it.
And you said some story there about some young lady went to school and he was eating fat for that.
The mother, she had nothing else to feed the kids with, like, and really she hadn't. and she was boiling a pot of potatoes. But her way of serving the pot of potatoes was she'd have collected all these flour bags, the half sacks of flour, and made tablecloths out of them. Stitched a couple of them together and made a tablecloth. And she'd spread the tablecloth on the floor and empty the pot of spuds onto the floor. And the kids used to come around, crawl around on the floor and eat their potatoes there. You know, it's hard to believe.
But they weren't the only ones that used to do.
Oh no, that was a regular thing.
You said someone used to go down with.
Mihal,
Yeah.
Mihal Shukru.
Yeah.
He was never in the want of his dinner, but nothing would do him only to be
Those
down in
potatoes were nicer than what
Yeah.
you got at home.
Yes.
Amazing.
And that old lady said that she always had such a soft spot for Mihal because she said he never knew he was any different from, or brought up any different from any one of the rest of us.
Very good.
She said he'd be on the ground peeling his potatoes with his hands and trying to look around and see what everyone else was doing, and he was in the middle of it doing it.
When did they start? We'll say behind then, like they had the mussels. When?
You know, they're a whole new idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're in the
And then-
60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about the salmon? Was there a lot more salmon caught, or?
oh, there was an awful lot more salmon and more of it. But then, remember, you weren't allowed catch it.
Yeah, the old rights and the
Yeah.
fishing rights and all that business there.
Yes.
But that kind of changed at some stage, didn't it?
They started a co-op in
They started
Cronin.
to go up in the Cronin there. But sure, Cronin is an amazing place, like, because there's nothing there but houses, and you would imagine how did people survive, like, because there was no...
No way of survival.
So it had to be fishing,
It had
like.
to be.
And yet the business people in Killorglin would prefer the Cronin people coming in than the farmers over the below.
Yeah.
They were a lot more decent.
Oh, they were. If they wanted something, they bought it and they paid for it.
Yeah. I remember
There was no
one
heckling.
of my own family coming down, and they drove down the front, down Cronin. There's some beautiful houses there now, you know. Frank said, he said that Nama must own an awful lot of Cronin. I said, forget it, Cronin was paid for before anyone lived there, because they went over to America and they sent home the money
They did.
and to build, and their houses were built for them, and they were built by Cronin builders, and so on, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They had an economy of their own.
They ran their own economy down the front of that place.
There was a fellow telling me yesterday, I was at a port with a fellow that was Nisa gone, and he was saying when the families, the Fitzgeralds, and he says, when they came to Ballivone, everyone knew they had a few bob. They were fishermen. They were wealthier than many more than the other people.
Yes.
And where were they from?
Behind Ballinashkilligs.
Oh, yeah.
Like they always said there was money where there was fishermen.
And the two the old ladies, even very involved in golfing did as well, weren't they?
Oh, we were.
Well, we could say nothing good about our golf. It was poor quality, but we did put the effort into organisation and looks.
You gave years that.
We gave years supporting the club and keeping it going. And you were the one that didn't get out to play because you had to give your place to someone else to keep the thing going. Because at the time, you see, there was no such thing as a ladies'
A timesheet.
or a ladies'
85 was
time.
the first time that the timesheet came in. 85.
Yes. Of course, it was monopoly of the men's sport, but it was like historically, that's what it was. There was no crib about that, but you just had to change the mentality of the mind.
Yeah, but the men were decent to us.
Oh, sure, we never had
No,
any trouble
no.
with them. No.
Was there a time we'd say when no women could play nectar?
I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
because
Gone away.
they hadn't
I remember
organised.
Margaret Connie Foley, they had a
Yeah.
ladies' thing,
Yes.
and she used to be buying prizes. And they were nominal, you know, you'd be delighted to win it. But the prizes went too big and too expensive. to me, it ruined the game.
Mhm.
But that was just me.
Even great memories, fair play, even great history.
Finola, just there earlier on, I was just thinking, like below, like there was puck fair, like we're saying, and you know the fair days and all those, like. But they had the days, we'll say.
The fair days were desperate in Upper Bridge Street because all the side of our street, the cattle were. And I remember one day you had cattle there and their owners had to go on tippy-toe to see over the back of the animals. But my mother got the bricks in the front of the place because she couldn't keep painting with
Painting and washing.
yeah, all the time. And yet the sheep fairs were worse because the little knobs, yeah, they'd go on your shoes, they'd go every place. But the fair days, they didn't bring custom really because people were afraid to come.
What about the puck, the old puck, when the caravans would be way out the Killarney Road?
Oh yeah, I wonder. Oh, Agnes Joy, Lord of Mercy, her brought me out one puck fair's night and to see the caravans. Oh, they were beautiful. They were all lined with satin and the paraffin lamps. The colours, I can still picture. I was thrilled to go out there. You used to have train loads of people coming, and you had a pile of people coming from Cork City, from Blackpool, and they'd be buying souvenirs and everything, going back. And then the train closed, and buses. For the first couple of years, it was, you'd say, oh, the crowd isn't here. But they came anyway. But they didn't come in droves like they did.
Like with the trains.
Yeah.
Can you remember we'd say growing up though, only you, and the way up on straight down, there's only one way going up and down. When it was a two-way street, you still present any problems for horse and cars and donkey cars? Or, was it ever an issue?
Then they didn't know any different. Well, the footpaths were very narrow. My boys, they'd run out of the shop and onto the footpath and turn at right angles. I'd say if they didn't give heart attacks to a lot of drivers, I don't know. But they had to learn how to stay in the footpath. I often had to go around the block about 3 times. My mother would be coming out to go to mass. But you couldn't hold up the traffic. But I often thought for those living in the town, the one-way street was bad because in my youth all the houses were homes, which they aren't now. And when if you have elderly people there, it isn't easy to stop because you're holding up all traffic. Yeah.
Oh, sure, the town is completely changed over there. There's no homes there, like there's no.
Oh no.
There's nobody except Mary Cannon living in Upper Bridge Street now.
The grades,
Yeah.
Stephen is living, yeah.
Do you remember all the pubs that used to be in town that time?
I always remember Pat Joyce next door. They had a Beamish pub. And you had all the Tinker women. I can still see them out the back window. Or from upstairs. And they'd be sitting down on the ground with their...
Bottle of cider.
Yeah, bottles, pile of drink. Sitting flat down outside in the yard. There'd be no rugs or anything else for them. But
The sea the way I burst.
oh, they'd be there for, yeah.
And
But then when Pat left, that finished that. They made that place their own.
it was a great house for food for during the fair as well. Joy's there.
And he was a good place for the old dry country as well, the people with the bagels and all
Yeah,
that.
but his wife, she started up a grocery end of it, like you'd see now in the supermarkets. She had all that. And then do you remember your man down in Tully Cross? What was his name? Gilby.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I remember his wife was very uppity.
Snooty.
Oh, she was.
He was a bit of a mystery man there.
He was.
And he'd a tower, hadn't he?
Yeah,
I remember he was going to Pet Joy's a lot.
Yeah.
is that the way?
Go away.
Yeah.
We went up anyway into his tower. It But you know what the poor man was doing? He was studying the ducks and he was also shooting them from up there. And that was all that tower was about.
The rumour
Native
was,
people were afraid of him.
That's what it was. That was
Yeah,
it.
the mystery. He was
He was
mystery.
mystery.
they reckon he was watching the bee, he was keeping an eye on the bee. But he had the best of stuff in there, I had.
Oh yes. It was made of blocks of cut limestone.
And all the knives and forks, they were all pure silver.
Some local builders bought it afterwards, years afterwards, after it was
It
ripped.
was a pity. It was kind of a landmark.
Yes, it was a pity. And it would have been a great tourist
Attraction.
draw. Because there's no doubt about it. You would disturb none of the ducks and they would actually come up around you, you know, within feet of you.
Can you remember Finola would say when the Fairfield that time did and the circuses had been coming and all that business? It was
Yeah. All the lads I have photographs outside. I have a photograph of John, my brother, and a child's tricycle, and I'm behind him, and the grass growing up around.
Oh,
That, because I brought down all my albums when you were coming, but you would have so much poking in them. But I remember it well, and all the youngsters just tried to get a job there.
that's what it is.
Yeah. And I remember the year I came back, birds were now where the houses are, you know, where the, what would you call it? No, not the houses, the apartment. And that's all birds took up. And Puck Fair was the other side of the thing. And I remember Daniel Bird, and they're calling him Buddy Bird. I said, he's not, he's Donald. No, he's Buddy. I knew him. He went to school in Wexford. There was Church of Ireland school near where we were. And there was a man working with my father who was Church of Ireland, and your man used to visit there, and of course my mother knew them, because my grandmother was supposed to be very nice to Mr. Bird when he came. The church were very against him early on.
I heard it before.
Yeah, and I mean they did wonderful work for the church afterwards. But every year, great way to keep my tree in, the night Mr. Bird came visiting, and he'd give them discs and whatnot for the. Sure, that's all youngsters. Want.
Yeah, for the
Yeah.
rides and
But all that
bumper
now is
and-
gone, you know.
What was magic and Duffy circus then in that circus.
Oh yeah.
Coming and
Oh
everything.
God, we used to love it. And we'd go down playing around and whatnot, and
Seeing the animals.
yeah. We were so lucky, we were free and easy, eager too.
Yeah, we were playing soccer and football up there way up from
You do.
my father would come up and he'd give one whistle up and all coming home to be getting dark but have to go home.
Yeah.
But we were stay out playing like
Do you remember the turf lorries?
the Weybridge.
The Weybridge there, but all Mill Road. It was all turf lorries. Chubs, I suppose, was it or what?
I don't remember them now.
I remember them lining up. But there was an aunt of Josie Mangan's, you know.
Joe's, yeah.
Yeah. She came home after years and years. And it was must have been a Wednesday, we were closed, and I heard her saying, look upstairs now. They look out upstairs to see who's at the door. That's what they do in Killorglin. But I opened the door and they came in, and they were talking away. I think there were two sisters. They hadn't been home for 40 years or something. And 3 times she said, oh my God, Tess Duffy. And there was a traffic jam in the middle road today. Imagine a traffic jam in the middle road. When we were young, there was hardly any car went up and down there.
And
then
the turkeys at Christmas.
So I remember Christmas Eve, my mother got a present of a turkey. And we had our own turkey got. So we hung it up off the rafters. But she had to go to Dublin anyway, and she was coming home. We said, is the turkey all right? Sure, it was frozen stiff. It was as if it was into the deep freeze.
Can you remember that about the railway?
Oh, I can. My famous thing in the railway was, when I was going back to school, I used to go by train from Killorglin, Farn 4, up to Dublin. But even when we used to come visiting, it was by the railway, you know. we'd arrive. But I remember being back there one day and Sheila Healy, Dorothy Merciner, and Sheila Foley were coming home from Rome. It was the Holy Year. And I remember Maureen Houlihan was there, plus others. And I said, Maureen, girl, I said, are you going to Rome? And she turned around to me and she said, Jesus Christ, girl, do you think it's out of the cow's back my father gets the money? And another day I was back there, and this man, he was going back to America. And he was kept talking to his sister, and the train pulled out. And he had to walk down to the goods station to get onto it.
Oh, yeah.
That's my father now, up there, sitting down in the front over there. See, like me.
So we're fine looking men.
That was the bank staff now in Newcastle West.
I'm just looking here at an album of fabulous photographs. And there's a fabulous photograph here of Duffy's.
That's the night we closed.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
They had a party in the street from it.
Well, that's about his time for it.
Huh? That's Mattie's father in the centre,
Yeah.
selling, and Mattie's there on the side of it.
Yeah.
Kathleen and Finola, it's been a pleasure and a lovely interview.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And some of the stories were great, very important. And we hope this will be there for 100 years from now, and that people will be listening to you and what happened.
It certainly gives me a different appreciation of what we used to call screech.
Do you know them?
Scoriacht.
Yes.
Kadeshin.
Visiting
I see
houses
it.
at night.
Oh yeah.
And why it used to go on all night.
Yeah.
Because once the stories start, the wilder they get. Yeah, well, remember to.
Yeah.